My name's Charles Green, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Belatrix Software. And firstly, a very warm welcome to everyone who's joined the call today for joining the webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing, does Nearshore still work? We're going to be examining some of the issues regarding the nearshore services industry. We're going to look at how it's changed in the past 12 to 18 months, some of the dynamics which are taking place at the moment, and also sharing our vision for the industry in the coming years. And I'm particularly delighted today to be joined by both Kirk Laughlin from Nearshore Americas and Alex Robbio, the president and co-founder of Belatrix Software. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves? Perhaps start with Kirk to start with.
Hi, everyone. This is Kirk Laughlin. Pleased to have you join the call today.
Hi, everyone. This is my name is Alex Robbio, and like Charles mentioned, I'm the president and co-founder of Belatrix Software, a nearshore software development provider from Latin America.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And just before we get started, I want to go through over a couple of very quickly some issues regarding the webinar today. This is going to be more of a general open discussion. You should be able to see both Alex and Kirk on the webcam. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see, you can't see me at the moment. But we are looking forward to taking your questions. And so please do ask us questions, and you can do this via one of two ways. You can either ask us a question on the GoToMeeting on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. You'll see in the chat box. You can ask us a question there. But we will also be live tweeting throughout the webinar, and we're going to be using the hashtag Nearshore2016. So please do feel free to ask us your questions via Twitter as well. And now we're particularly excited with this webinar because we are coming up to the Nearshore Nexus conference, which is going to be held in San Francisco in May, in a couple of weeks' time. And I want to start then with the webinar by asking Kirk to give us an overview of the event and some of the key themes that he sees can be playing out during the event.
So first of all, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Alex, for having me participate at this conference call webinar. We're obviously very excited about Nexus 2016. For those who don't know, Nearshore Nexus was created about 6 years ago and was held in New York City the previous 5 years, and really just developed, a strong base there. But we also, I think, last year sort of recognized the opportunity to go where we really think there is what we consider kind of the epicenter of global IT disruption. And, it's interesting because a lot of people would argue that Miami might be an option, and I think now that we're here, set up in San Francisco, we feel like we made the right choice. It's incredibly important for the nearshore industry to pay attention and engage with the level of dynamism that radiates out of Silicon Valley, and it influences not just the companies here but companies throughout the country. And I think it's important to us to be very deeply understanding what these trends are, what's causing these changes to happen within enterprise IT, and really engage and partner with this industry. So that was really a lot of the basis for wanting to be at this in San Francisco. And I think it's still early days for the relationship between the Bay Area and Silicon Valley and the nearshore. There's definitely some things going on, no question, but I think there's a much bigger opportunity for the nearshore industry to participate in this emergence, and there's some key opportunities I think we'll be discussing today. Just briefly, as far as the conference goes, as you can see here, our theme is reimagining the Americas. One theme that never seems to change is the fact that many U.S. business people still need a tremendous amount of new, real, high-quality information and knowledge about doing business in Latin America. That doesn't seem to, we've pushed the needle a little bit collectively, but I have to stress that we have to continue to act as a community and work collectively to really educate and prove and show through performance and data and research what the nearshore is really capable of. So we're going to be approaching it from that angle. We're very proud to host our keynote speaker this year, Laura Chinchilla, former president of Costa Rica, who will talk about the tremendous success story of Costa Rica. Really, really important things Costa Rica has done. They've been consistent, in terms of commitment to to education. I give incredibly high marks to the CINDE group, which is out there promoting Costa Rica in foreign markets consistently. So we'll hear about that. We've got a great presentation about the Argentina IT agenda from Carlos Pallotti. Many of you may know him. He's now a ministerial person in the Argentine government. Our research director, Sean Goforth, will be presenting on the state of Nearshore, some very fresh research around the direction of the market. We also have, and I know we'll get into this in the session today, but we have a whole session on startups and how startups in the U.S. can leverage Nearshore partners. What are the opportunities? What are the risks? How should a company blend its resource model, being offshore, nearshore, or onshore? And there's we'll have folks from the VC and angel community there who are going to express their views on how that should work as well. We're also going to get into, we have a CXO, CIO panel that will talk largely about talent and the pursuit of global talent and what cost does to that. Being in Silicon Valley, there's no question cost is a real pressure for a lot of organizations, so we'll get into that. We've got a special presentation from Southwest Airlines on managing vendors, which we're looking forward to. Also a special session on shared services and captives, and ranking those locations within the Caribbean and Latin America. Definitely some attention will be paid to financial services outsourcing and captives. So, and also some discussions on omni-channel and lots of other things as usual. We put a lot of effort into this, a lot of value. So that's sort of it in a nutshell, Charles.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And I want to now dive into one of the issues which you raised there in particular, and that is about how can innovative startups benefit, how can they leverage nearshore partners, how can they really take advantage of the opportunity of the talent and the companies which are operating in the nearshore industry. And I think it's very clear that we know that well-known companies such as Skype, Slack to GitHub all worked with partners during the early stage of their development as a company, whilst when they were startups, they were all very much taking advantage of partners, of service providers. So now I want to turn and ask Alex, given your experience with the range of startups that I know that we work with at Belatrix, perhaps you can describe some of the issues. Why do organizations look to nearshore? What are some of the benefits, and perhaps also some of the concerns as well?
Sure. In terms of the benefits, I think it's very clear that outsourcing in general is very beneficial for any organization that is trying to stretch a budget and that also needs to get to a certain goal or achieve a certain delivery in a very limited time frame. Nearshore in particular is it provides many additional benefits. I think any startup, not only in California but anywhere in the world, will value flexibility. We think that through outsourcing and through nearshore in particular, the ability for a startup founder or CEO or a CTO to be able to ramp up a team or multiple teams with a short notice, but at the same time also being able to ramp it down when needed is something that they value, and that it's something that adds a lot of value in the organization. Of course, what they're trying to do in the end is to get as much done or innovate as much as possible, spending the least amount possible as well. So that longer runway that outsourcing can provide, and nearshore in particular can provide, is a huge help in an initial stage. One direct feedback we have received when working with startups, in particular in Silicon Valley, I think this is prevalent anywhere in the US, but in particular in Silicon Valley, is a concern about talent pool. Ramping up a team of 15, 20 developers and QA engineers and architects and user experience engineers is very complex. And I'm talking about a small number of people here. So even getting that initial team in place after round A or round B is a significant constraint for innovative product companies. So even if they have the money, they not always have the time or the means to attract those people. So being able to access that bigger talent pool through outsourcing and in Nearshore makes a huge difference in that initial stage. The other ones are maybe a little bit less indirect, but also as important. Another benefit that comes to mind is this idea of focusing on your core instead of spending a lot of effort and time and resources into ramping up your team, recruiting, training, and so on, because they can actually rest on a partner doing that for them. So that accelerates innovation quite a bit. And they can also stay very selective in terms of who they bring on to their team by doing that. And in the end, it's all about innovation, getting to market more quickly with a better product. And Nearshore is incredibly well positioned to provide that because you have the ease of access, whether you need your consultants to travel and visit you, whether you need to visit them, whether you need to collaborate on a real-time basis, pick up the phone or jump on a Skype call or a Slack chat session and collaborate, brainstorm, and so be able to apply real agile and not something that is more asynchronous like it happened in traditional outsourcing. So those are some of the benefits. Of course, in terms of the challenges, some of the challenges that we see in our experience working with startups, especially the ones in early stages, is that they don't necessarily have a vendor management process. So it's hard for them to know who to partner with, what locations to look at, what are the trade-offs, what are the benefits from one location to the other, and that's where I think events like Nexus and Nearshore Americas as a website and as a publication added significant value, because in one place they can compare multiple locations, they can compare multiple vendors, they can read stories, case studies, issues, concerns, and so on. So those resources are very, very valuable. So those I guess are some of the pros and cons. In terms of success stories, I'm incredibly proud and happy to mention that we have had many of those over the last 12 years that we have been in this activity. In particular, a couple come to mind that are from right there, from the Silicon Valley. One is a company that we started working with in 2012. The name of the company was Foundry, and we helped them accelerate innovation through engaging different teams of top talent in Peru and Argentina. We were able to help them develop products from scratch. And what I remember meeting with the CTO, and he told me my mission, his mission, was to make the lives of the pundits very, very hard. So making their competition's lives very hard. So innovating much faster than they could and moving to market with at a much quicker pace. And he said that's what Belatrix allows. That's what Nearshore allows, is being able to, without trading off in quality, without trading off in speed and agility, being able to provide that, get that product to market much more quickly. I guess the happy ending here, and it's not really an ending, is that the company was acquired by a Fortune 500 company for $165 million, and not only that, but actually the product is still out there. It's still helping thousands of banks all over the world, thousands of consumers all over the world. So it's a very, very happy story. So from startup to launching a global product, to being acquired, to being very, very successful. Another one, which is also a recent case, was a company specializing in video ad delivery. and we engaged with them in 2012, so similarly to Foundry, and they ended up being acquired by America Online for over $400 million as well. So there's a lot of these stories in Silicon Valley, and that's what makes it so fun, so exciting. You know, there's a lot of great ideas, a lot of excitement, but then there's also a lot of opportunity. So we're very happy to be a part of that.
Excellent, thank you, Alex. And then, Kirk, does that echo some of the things that you're seeing as well in the conversations that you're having, particularly in Silicon Valley and some of the other innovative startup areas?
Yeah, I think Alex did a great job summarizing it. I couldn't agree more with the fact that there is really not much of a mature vendor management function, and that can be a real liability if they have to not only select a partner, but then learn the process on the job, if you will, working and managing and figuring out the deliverables and on and on. I think, you know, the other thing that I just want to stress is not all nearshore providers are created equally, and this is really important as we get into and I think later on, Charles, you have a question about where this market is going, but you know, there's different tiers of quality with providers and different things going on in different markets. So I think those startups have to select carefully, and absolutely knowledge is very valuable in this area, as Alex was saying.
Yeah. And Alex, I know that what Belatrix has done also working with startups is to engage in slightly different ways than perhaps you traditionally think of a provider working with a company. Can you give a bit more detail about that?
Sure. We through our experience in working with startups, we have launched and actually been using a number of different models. One has to do with technology. So one thing we realized was that startups need help very early on in terms of their technology definitions. So for that reason, we partnered with some CTOs, and we're building a roadmap, a technology roadmap, so that a CTO of a startup can get different ideas and what works, what doesn't work, where should I take my technology, what type of stack should I look at or shouldn't I look at? What about cloud? How do I leverage cloud? What about security? All those things are very important decisions that we've seen startups sometimes end up regretting not having thought about more deeply in the initial stages. So we help our clients in kind of going through that process very early on and doing it in a way that will help them build something scalable for the long run, and not just a minimal viable product that you have to completely throw away. The other thing is also coming up with innovative engagement models contractually. So we've done a number of engagements where we've actually taken either a position in the company, so done work for equity, or also use convertible notes, for example, as a way of payment. So that's been one way of really showing our commitment and also aligning our interests very, very strongly. And the benefit in that case, of course, is that the startup founder gets a longer runway because we're being able to do more work for less money. And of course, it also aligns our interest in a very, very significant way, because now all of a sudden we also have participation in the back end of the company. So that's very, very engaging to us. There's also other models. We're very strong agile practitioners, so we also like having agility built into those models, so providing a lot of flexibility. It's hard for a startup to upstage, let's say a startup in the fintech world, trying to upstage traditional banks and so on, and trying to replicate their model. So going and engaging with a traditional outsourcing vendor, with a traditional contract, well, that's not going to give you an edge compared to the larger company you're trying to upstage. So it's important when a startup is starting this type of relationship that they look at it creatively And that's something we've done, where there is components of risk and rewards built in. There is flexibility, so they can ramp up or down with minimum consequences and so on. So things that really make a big difference when you're in a startup phase.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's certainly the case, and that willingness to show commitment to the organization, willing to put the skin in the game, as it's often referred to as well, is particularly important for startups. But I want to shift gears slightly. And following the event, the initial Nexus event last year, Alex, you wrote a blog called Nearshore No Longer Works. And I want to examine that in a bit more detail to understand what you meant by that. And do you think the situation has changed in the past 12 months? And perhaps, yeah, you can give a few details about exactly what you meant by that.
Sure. Well, I guess, and I don't want to take full credit for that idea. It's something that we were realizing internally. As part of the management team, of course, the marketing team, we were thinking of what is differentiating our industry from the rest, and in particular Belatrix, and we realized that this idea of nearshore as an advantage just in itself, due to proximity, ease of travel, cultural similarity, the time zone, was a good value proposition, but it wasn't enough anymore. There are a lot of companies that offer that, and that doesn't always translate into better value for the buyer or for the client. So what we were looking for was how do we take this and really make it into something that provides that value to the customer. And so that's why we came up with a number of initiatives, like strengthening our design thinking capabilities, our user experience capabilities, so being able to collaborate not only with the client but also the client's users. And I believe that there are other companies that are doing it as well. So I'm excited that we together as an industry, as a nearshore outsourcing industry, we're pushing this this idea forward. Not everyone is doing it, but there are quite a few companies that have taken it and are advancing some of these topics. So I'm excited to see that. It's kind of move, it challenges us, of course. I wish we were the only ones and we could claim that we're it. But it challenges us and it pushes us to keep achieving even more.
Yeah, and I think from when I read that blog and the way I thought about it was, I think there's also certainly the need to raise the bar in terms of the technology specialization of nearshore providers. And as you mentioned earlier, the ability for startups to look to nearshore partners and brainstorm with experts who have architected similar solutions many times. And to be able to do that, we need to be investing in the training to ensure that individuals keep up with this rapidly changing technology environment. I think there's also really the need for nearshore providers to adapt to the new needs of different buyers as they're undergoing this kind of digital transformation, which we hear about a lot. How can we really help them achieve that? How can we move on from, as you said, from in the past, these nearshore services? How can we really help them achieve the digital transformation that they're undergoing? And I think the two main parts there. Firstly, it's really to help organizations see their product from the outside in, and sometimes I can see it sound a little bit cliched when people say focus on the customer, or it's the age of the customer, as some people have spoken about it. But important here is that the speed of customer feedback is so much faster that you can rapidly bring in insights from customers into your product development. And here you can see organizations are using different approaches, as you mentioned, Alex, design thinking. You can look to customer journey mapping, for example. And these are some of the capabilities that I think nearshore in the future needs to be bringing to organizations. And secondly, it's also about the technical skills, as we've already mentioned. We need to develop deeper technology specialization. Can we bring in top-class experts in some of the new technologies that organizations are using to drive their digital initiatives? And here, you can think about sensors and the Internet of Things, wearables, near-field communication, augmented reality. So a lot of different areas where organizations are really using these new technologies to drive very much new business digital initiatives. Kirk, does that also for you, does that, how did you see, how did you view Alex's blog last year?
Well, I mean, we need people like Alex to be very candid, and I'm always happy to see Alex being willing to be open and thoughtful about this and maybe challenge the conventional norm. I mean, I don't think in general the nearshore region, nearshore community has aggressively sought to be at the cutting edge. If you really look at the way the market behaves, I think there's a bit of passivity, but it's difficult to generalize. But I think the point I made then, and I still think it stands true today, is that we still need more thought leadership, and we still need more marketplace engagement to really develop insights. One of the things I do like a lot about what Belatrix is doing is, I know that you, Charles, with the work you're doing, you're kind of creating pools with Fernando's help, pools of writers and bloggers within Belatrix who really have a lot of insight. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of insight about what customers are dealing with on a daily basis, and we're always struck by, when we speak with providers, that a lot of providers don't seem to know how much knowledge they have internally, and they have to learn how to express that, and they have to learn how to show the ways in which they provided solutions and consulted and brought that partner or that client into a really positive result. Incredibly important. If I'm a provider and I'm going to go on one trade mission to Miami, you know, or some other place, and for 3 days meet a few people and think that that's what my marketing strategy is, that's not sufficient. It's a matter of really engaging the audience using you know, digital marketing campaigns, content marketing, live events, and really a sales and marketing sophistication that runs parallel with all the things you just described, Charles, with commitment to a technology, you know, innovative practices and things. What I hope to see, just as another member of the Nearshore community, is some level of commitment toward a certain technology direction, not to mitigate or not to dismiss others, but if there's enough of a concentration to say around IoT or something, we can work collectively and support each other and begin to brand around that. It doesn't have to be one provider or one country. So that, you know, that's a possibility, but I think it's a very important topic, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back to your point regarding some of the thought leadership here at Belatrix, what's interesting is, as you mentioned, these, you know, many of the people in the organization have tremendous insight, but perhaps they don't necessarily have the skills to share that in a blog or a white paper or a webinar. So it's really about trying to put in some of the processes to help them easily share their insights with the broader community.
Exactly.
But I want to now move on slightly. I know in preparing for this webinar, Kirk, we discussed slightly that there is still some resistance from buyers to engage with Latin America. And I want to address this point. You know, as we've heard already some of the advantages of Latin America, but why do you think, in your opinion, Kirk, is there still some of this reluctance, some of this resistance still existing?
Yeah, well, I don't think what I'm going to say is all that new. I mean, we do see kind of a legacy lack of really having enough of an open mind to really consider the nearshore community, nearshore providers, nearshore countries as viable. I have to say, and I just think it's even myself and members of our team. I mean, I've taken probably close to 100 trips now to Latin America, the Caribbean, and virtually every single time I'm made aware of something unique or different, and it really comes down to the quality of people, and it's generally very impressive. And I just think that there's those of us who think we know it all, and we may not even know, because it's just such a broad, diverse population with different countries. So if you apply that and just say to buyers, many of them vendor management folks or IT leaders, hey, have you really considered it? Have you really spoke to your peers who have done that work? And generally, there's just not as much that I'd like to see at this point about that awareness. Now, there's other issues around vendor consolidation that could be a barrier, and I think the word outsourcing is still a barrier, and there's more savvy ways. I think some groups are overcoming that by really stressing that, you know, we're an extension of the internal team, that we're a part of that internal team. That may be semantics, may not be, but I think that the word itself is just such a lightning rod for some people, and it causes internal fear, internal resistance, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also just adding to that, from my perspective, I think the Nearshore community has done a pretty good job at raising the profile with the traditional IT stakeholders. You think about your CIO, they will be more familiar with the potential of Nearshore than many of the other stakeholders in an organization. The thing is, what we know is that technology budgets are shifting away from the traditional IT department towards business buyers, towards different stakeholders. So I think going forward, the next challenge really for us is to engage, to raise our profile with the new stakeholders who are really responsible for driving some of these digital initiatives, whether it's the head of e-business, the CMO, the chief digital officer, the VP of product development. How can we help these individuals? How can we really raise our profile? So when they're thinking of an innovative partner, they think, we think of Belatrix, we think of Latin America. Alex, what about from your perspective? Have you seen that resistance? Is there anything that you're doing to overcome that?
Yeah, you know, it's a very interesting point, because you know, you were mentioning that it's important to get to the, you know, the business area decision maker, and it's happened to us actually. It's pretty frustrating that you're doing a great work for a business line manager or chief of a business line. They're all excited, and when the time comes to execute a statement of work or a contract, it gets sent to procurement, and then procurement says, oops, sorry, you know, we at corporate have a master service agreement with this, you know, large, very monolithic traditional outsourcing provider, and that's it. You know, you're going to have to do it with them, and you know, it's frustrating for both, you know, for the person that needs that service within that corporation, as well as, of course, you know, you as a vendor. And there are multiple things that we have done, and they've been successful. Some of them have been investments in the right certifications. I mean, you know, what we try to do, I guess, is to limit the excuses. So be able to check all the right check boxes on the procurement checklist. That's one thing that, you know, that providers need to do. Sometimes I'm surprised to see that a lot of, you know, our peers in Nearshore are not familiar with some of the most important security practices or security, you know, security regulations or security certifications, process maturity certifications, trade certifications, and so on. Those are important, even though they're not necessarily going to change your company 180 degrees. They give some peace of mind to the buyer, and that's, in the end, you know, the purchasing person or the procurement person, that's what they need. They need risk mitigation. So those are, as boring as they are, they're important in that sense. And of course, you know, there are other things that we as providers can do, and you know, is do more work on the innovation front, meaning engaging with those business line leaders in helping them come up with, you know, innovative ideas that are very aligned with the Nearshore model, that are really, really hard to do in the traditional outsourcing model of using Asia or some of the other locations that you know, were important in the past. That's something that makes a big difference as well. And of course, like we mentioned before, this idea of having different engagement models. You know, can you make it a solution instead of a, you know, a time and material engagement? Can you make it a partnership? I mean, there are multiple ways that we can engage that that may be able to overcome some of those concerns.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Alex. I want to move on. I know we've kind of skipped ahead slightly with the slide, but for the final part of this webinar, I want to ask both Alex and Kirk about their vision for Nearshore. But before I just get to that, I do want to remind everyone on the line today that if you want to ask a question at the end after this, we will be taking questions. So do write your question into the chat box or tweet us the question using the hashtag Nearshore2016. But let's start with Kirk. What is your vision for the nearshore industry going forward over the next few years?
Yeah. I think we're going to begin to really see a couple of things. I think we will see more and more evidence of what I would kind of consider global innovation hubs or cities in Latin America getting more respect or visibility. Buenos Aires, Guadalajara. Probably Sao Paulo. We'll see if Bogota can kind of rank in that area. Lima's certainly doing some interesting things. I think more and more of those cities will emerge and is part of that awareness building. I think we'll also see greater and greater differentiation among the provider community. I think I've got at least 4. You have the kind of highly adaptive, highly engaged firms. Certainly Belatrix is part of that. You have niche folks who are going after very specific niches, seeing specific opportunities, and there's a lot of, I think it's a very intelligent way to play it for some folks. Then you have a lot of companies that are just kind of passive. They're waiting for business to come to them. They're kind of relying on sort of Nearshore 101 approaches, and it'll be interesting to see how they do. And then you have the global players still very, very present in the market, having these, these master service agreements, and they certainly have continued influence in this space. So I think it'll be an interesting time. I mean, the good news is, I don't want to sound pessimistic. I think there is still just great opportunity for this market through the whole stack of IT, through other types of business services. I was having a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who does a lot of work with insurance companies out here, and there's tremendous opportunities for certain areas of the insurance industry in terms of nearshore support. But it really takes a dedicated effort by the community, by the provider, to know about these things, and that's what I hope to see over the next few years.
Thank you. And Alex?
Well, on our side, we are as a group, our management group, we are incredibly excited about what's coming for the next few years. We feel like we continue seeing this growing interest in Nearshore, and I think the companies that are well positioned to take advantage of that will see a very significant boost. The ones that are investing in education, and not just educating their people, not just investing in training their own employees, but actually educating the community, investing in building relationships with universities, doing R&D, working on innovation. Those are going to be the ones that are going to make a big difference. And I'm excited to see that there are a few of those companies out there, and I think that's going to continue making the game very fun. There will be a lot of competition. We know that like Kirk mentioned, the traditional outsourcing players are also establishing or growing their presence in Latin America, which means that there is a value proposition. Otherwise, why would they be here? But I think that the pure plays will have a significant advantage if they play those cards well. What does that mean in our scenario? Well, it means we're going to have to embrace some risks. We have to develop new service offerings, and that's not only Belatrix, but as Kirk mentioned, for the other companies as well. Specialize in certain verticals, specialize in certain technologies. Get closer not only to the customer, but actually the customers, and that's something that we're doing through design thinking, for example, and customer journey mapping, and helping our clients not only develop a great technology, but actually an incredible customer experience. So those are, the companies that do that well. We feel like are going to do incredibly well, and are going to benefit and provide and pass on those benefits of Nearshore into their onto their customers. Of course, agility continues being a very significant factor. We have seen as early practitioners of Agile and Scrum, we have seen a lot of value from it. But now what we're seeing is that what customers want, or what the industry wants, is this idea of Agile in a context of maturity. Meaning, yes, it's great you're Agile, it's great that you know Scrum, but prove to me that you can do it reliably, consistently, and in a context of security. For example, do you have the right certifications? Are you ISO 27001 certified? Kirk was mentioning the opportunity in insurance. I would mention the opportunity in fintech. We're seeing incredible innovation happening in fintech, and we're working with a lot of really amazing companies in that space. But in their case, they value agility, but at the same time, they want to know that their code is secure, that their data is secure, that our people know secure coding practices, that we know secure testing practices. So you have to combine that. So again, I think you're going to see efforts in that front, certainly from us, but also from other players. But again, I guess the bottom line is that it's an exciting time. Most of us are growing very fast. Our competition from India and China, they're investing in our region, which means that there's great value here. So we're excited to share this story.
Excellent, thank you, and I certainly agree. This is really very much an exciting time in the industry at the moment. But with now, I want to open up for questions from the audience. So as mentioned, do feel free to ask this question via the chat box or via Twitter with the hashtag Nearshore2016. And actually, I see that we already have one question from the audience, which is, for startups, is there a certain point at which it is best to engage with a partner? And I'm thinking here of the typical life cycle of a startup. I'm not sure who wants to take that, either Alex or Kirk.
Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know if we could say there's a best moment. We have seen, in general, we have seen that companies that have some type of core team are able to engage more effectively. When we have been, or when we have had to work with, say, a co-founder, a couple of co-founders that get money to develop an idea from scratch, those relationships are a little bit harder because they may not have the technical vision and the ability to engage at that level. So if they can afford, building a small core team and then at that point engaging a provider, that's where it makes a lot of sense. But after that, it's really on any stage. I mean, we have been working with companies that are, that maybe are 4 or 5 people, maybe a couple of co-founders and 2 or 3 people on the technical team, and they're helping them from that point on. We can engage user experience consulting so that we can go to their user base and understand their needs, their wants, and build out the architecture, the hosting, the deployment, the environments. I mean, from that stage on, there's no limit to what we can do. And then, of course, we have clients that are Fortune 500 companies, so that means that there's no ending in terms of when a company benefits from this type of relationship. But I do recommend, at least if the co-founders are not technical, at least getting a couple of people in the team that are technical before they engage. Otherwise, it can result in some complex communication dynamics and so on.
Thank you. And we have a further question which has come in, and that is, what advice do you have for a startup that is looking for a partner, but this is the first time that they are working with a partner on their core product?
I think that, Kirk, you have probably some insight in terms of how to do the research and so on.
Yeah, well, just I'm reluctant to do self-promotion, but I have to say we have picked up, started to put out a lot more content in Nearshore Americas related to how startups navigate Nearshore. So I would encourage people to mine Nearshore Americas. There's a tremendous amount of information on that site now. We have over 4,000 articles and more. There's quite a bit of information there about dealing with vendors and managing contracts. And we have one, Alex, you probably might find interesting. The other day, one of the vendor management guys at UPS said that, of course, I expect to pay less upon renewal. So certainly willing to bring up, controversial points, but
that one needs to be taken down.
So, yeah, and I'll have a lot more to say about this after Nexus, because we have lots of startups coming to the Nexus, and we have this panel on it, and I think we'll hear fairly kind of on-the-ground perspectives about this, wrestling with the risk, wrestling with the loss of control question. And, like so many relationships, it's not what the black and white says on the contract. That's one thing, but can a relationship be built? Can trust be built? And, I found a lot of companies in the nearshore space to be very nimble and very adaptable, and that's a good sign.
Wonderful. If I could add a little bit, great points, Kirk, but one thing I would suggest, of course, what Kirk mentioned, it's not just a contract, it's also, and maybe more importantly, the relationship itself. So visiting and, maybe coming up with a short list of 2 or 3 companies that you end up visiting if your budget allows. If not, companies that you engage in extended conversations, set up roundtables with your people and their people, and see how you get along. I mean, the chemistry makes a big difference in the end, so that makes a big difference. The other one is also kind of coming into it with some form of a plan, knowing, okay, what in my product could I start with, or could I start outsourcing? What is maybe a component, a module, a whatever that I could, that I could start with, and here's something that I think is very important. Don't go to the extreme of reducing risk too much, because if there is no risk, no one will be paying attention. We've seen that in a number of times, and it's very frustrating. You see people that want to minimize the risk so much that they end up giving out a component that no one cares about, that is not well spec'd out, that no one cares whether it gets delivered or not. So, then no one is paying attention, and oh surprise, it fails. So make sure that you limit the risk, but you have to have some risk. There's got to be some skin in the game for you as a user of outsourcing, and for the partner that you're using as well. So make sure that you find that balance and not go to the extreme of betting the whole company on it, nor making it so small and trivial that no one cares.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Let's just see if any further questions come in. Just check on Twitter. I don't see any questions there. We have one question which has just come in, which is, my VC is concerned that if I outsource, our value will go down because we don't own our own product. How would you respond to that?
I guess that's a great question, and it is something we have heard over the course of the years. And the reality is that what ends up happening is that your contract with your vendor is actually very tight. If you do your homework, and usually the template that you're going to receive from your prospect vendor will actually be tight already in terms of protections of IP, work made for hire, and so on. So there's a good chance that your contract with that vendor is stronger than the relationship you have with your own employees. So that's one aspect. The other one is that we never recommend that you have a 100% dependence on a vendor. So I wouldn't outsource every single thing, I would outsource any part of a product, but I wouldn't rely 100% on an outsourced relationship. I would always want at least to have a product owner on the customer side that has a deep understanding of the subject matter, some of the technology, the decisions that are being made, and hopefully also maybe an architect, someone that understands the decisions that are being made. That's the minimum. In most cases, the reality is that you have a mix. You have some internal people, some external people, and what you're doing is you're accelerating, not just throwing over the fence all of the knowledge. So in the end, it's a non-issue. If anything, it's actually just the opposite, like I said. And something interesting is that sometimes VCs say, well, the value is in your people, which of course we agree. People create that value. But in reality, no one is buying people. People can't be bought. So in the end, you have to look at what is the attrition rate in Silicon Valley, and you will find that it's incredibly high, to the point where many of our clients, we end up having, because we have such a low attrition rate of 10, 12%, we end up having the original people that were involved in the beginning, 5, 6 years ago, developing the product, and on the client side, they've turned. Every single person that was involved is no longer involved. So if anything, they actually achieve more continuity than they would have with their own employees. So I think it's a non-issue, but I can understand the concern. But it's addressable, through contracts. If you're picking the right partner with low attrition, with good security practices, it should be a non-issue. I don't know, Kirk, if you've heard that concern at all.
I have heard that concern. I think it's a very prevalent concern, but I do think it's a non-issue. People have to work through it. The speed to market thing has to be considered when dealing with an outsourcer. But I think, great points, Alex. Attrition's a real concern, and I think what the startup needs to really figure out is what is the plan, what needs to stay inside, and what needs to go out. That's really where it starts.
Thank you, Kirk and Alex. I see that we don't have any further questions on the chat or on Twitter at the moment, so I think this is a good time to wrap up. I know we're nearly at the top of the hour now. So firstly, I would like to say many thanks to Kirk for joining us today. It's been a delight to have you here on the call today. Thank you also to Alex for sharing your insights as well, and thank you to all the listeners as well for taking the time to join the call. Kirk, Alex, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I would just encourage our audience to keep a close eye on Belatrix and what Charles is doing. There's a really interesting that the volume of work these guys are up to with the webinars and content creation, and I happen to be an increasing fan of that, so I will be watching as well, and I appreciate being part of the discussion today.
On my side, the final thought, I guess, is I hope to see everyone in Nexus in a few weeks. Exciting times.
Yeah, we're looking forward to being there, looking forward to meeting everyone. Just let everyone know on the call that the recording of the webinar will be available within the next 24 hours. But with that, I'd like to say thank you and have a good day to everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.